bring in James Ham here, the insiders. Hammer, ESPN insiders were asked if they thought we would get a new champion for the 8th straight season this year in the NBA. 15 of them said yes. 11 of them said no, Oklahoma City would repeat. What way too early prediction do you have? Do you think we get a new champion next year?
Ooh, it's close. I think it's probably a coin flip. I don't know what you guys were talking about before I came on, but like I put the Knicks in that category. I put Denver in that category as someone who can compete. But like I think if you were betting, you'd probably take OKC against the field, but not by much. Like I think this is going to be a really interesting season, especially with a lot of the injuries that have already hit and that will impact teams like, the Pacers or Dallas. I think there's a lot of like questions coming into this season.
What you think about Cleveland? But I don't know if you mentioned them or not, but I mentioned Cleveland as being a true championship contender to me.
I think they're gonna have to prove it. They just haven't played well enough in the playoffs to make you feel like you can really put your money on them. They've had 2 really good regular seasons in a row. They've made some changes, but not all that much. I don't know. I like Cleveland, and they have a ton of talent, but at some point you have to actually win when the bright lights are on, and they haven't been able to do that.
Let me ask you guys a quick question. It doesn't matter. Like we're just talking. It's fine. But what's the difference between Cleveland and OKC this past year? OKC going into this past season, they got bounced in the second round. They were the number 1 seed the year before, got bounced in the second round of Dallas, and people looked at them like, "Oh yeah, that's the favorites."
Well, they saw them, I think, as an up and coming team. I think Cleveland, they were just like, "Wait, we didn't predict that." Wait a minute, we didn't predict them to be anything yet. So I think that's what it is.
Well, Cleveland,
no one bought Cleveland's regular season. Absolutely.
Yeah, they were 48-34 the year before and were the 4th seed in the East. It's not like they were bad, like it's just you weren't like 100% convinced that like Boston wasn't just slow playing the regular season, or that some of the other teams weren't just kind of slow playing a little bit. So I don't know. We'll see. But I definitely like Cleveland's got to be in the mix. They're a very, very talented team, and they've made some adjustments to the roster, but I don't think wholesale changes. So we'll have to see if Hunter can stay healthy at all. That's he's got a ton of talent, and he helped that team last year, but he's a guy that really hasn't been able to stay healthy at all.
Hammer, we have had really started by you and Kyle Matson. We have had a lot of Kings discussions today, and we've been discussing the championship players conversation that we were having earlier, and how you build out a contender and some of these different things. But I posed a question to these guys a couple of minutes ago that I'd love to pose to you, and that is there a scenario this season where you think we could look at it when it's all said and done and go, man, I think Doug Christie failed?
Well, I mean, yeah, every head coach has that, like, yeah, if this thing spins out of control completely and it careens, but like not on purpose, right? So I think there's something about like we were discussing earlier. If the Kings get to the trade deadline and they're 8 games under, and they're like the 9, 10, 11 seed, and you see the front office, a basketball decision made, right? Where either you trade a couple of players at the deadline, or you go to players and say, hey, look, the second half of the season, you're not going to play that much. Or, hey, DeMar, we didn't trade you at the deadline, but there are teams out there that want you. If you want to give up the, $5 million of your $10 million guarantee for next year, we'll let you leave right now and you can go play for a winner. Like, I definitely could see the season going that way, right? Where the last 25 games of the season are about the young players, whether it's, Devin Carter, Keon Ellis, Nate Clifford, Reynaud, Keegan Murray, just really focusing on that. But to me, that's not a failure on Doug Christie. That's the season going kind of a way that, to be honest, a lot of us, don't expect, but could definitely see it happening. And, when you win 48, 46, and 40 in 3 games in a row, 3 seasons in a row, you forget that, the previous 12 seasons before that, the best the team won was 39 and the second best was 33, and all the rest were under that. Like being good and being bad in the NBA is like a razor thin margin. And especially when it comes to like what happens in the final 25 games.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely could see them taking a step back. But again, it depends on how it looks when we're watching it, whether Doug has lost the room or whether they just can't function as a team because the mix is so bad. And I think we should all like take a step back and be able to realize the difference between those two things, and the difference between, giving up at the midway point of the season and going young and trying to play out the final 25 games of the season and being bad during the weakest time of your schedule. So I think there are plenty of ways in which this can go. But I think the long and the short of it is there's a lot of different ways to get to like 35 wins or 40 wins on a season. And we could look at it as a disappointment, or we can look at it as, oh, wow, I can't believe they actually, once we get into the season, that they actually came back and won that many games. And so I think they're like, again, I'm not even going to put a win-loss record on what it would be for Doug Christie to have a bad season, because I don't think we know what it is at all without seeing this team on the court.
James, when you talk about Doug Christie losing the team, or they're not buying into some of the things that he's trying to sell with this team, to me, that wouldn't be a Doug Christie issue. That would say a lot about those guys in the locker room. That would say a lot about those guys and who I want to have in that locker room moving forward. Because in a lot of ways, a lot of those guys out there, you were embarrassed last year. You looked a mess towards the end of the season. You got embarrassed in the playing game at home. And if you're coming back for this season, I understand you talk about uncertainty with the front office and people potentially being traded and all this other stuff, but you still have a lot of those guys outside of maybe DeMar DeRozan. You got a lot to prove. And if you get 20 games into the season and like, I'm just not feeling Doug Christie, after a lot of the rumors were you weren't feeling the previous coach, and that's why you weren't playing playing to a certain level as well, that says more about that locker room and those players in that locker room than it would Doug Christie to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't talk out of both sides of my mouth here. So I honestly, I told you guys last year when Mike Brown got fired, whatever happened, but the second a coach loses a locker room is the second they've got to go. That's always been sort of the way I look at it. And I can see it happening typically. For whatever reason it happened, right? But I agree with you to your point, Kenny, that if it's the same group of players and they just become coach killers, that's on them. And that stink, it goes with you. It travels with you for a lot of these guys. So I'm not going to give anybody a free pass, because like I don't care how long you've been in the league. If you're not performing to win basketball games, if what you're doing is to get your stats or whatever, then that doesn't help either. Like this, you're a team, and all 15 or 17 or 18, whatever it is you've got on the roster, every single one of them has a job to do. And if you're just out there to get yours, that's not at all, because I could see this season going that way, where a couple of guys are like, hey, look, I got to make a big decision on whether I'm going to opt into a contract for next year or not, or I've got to see if I'm going to make this roster next year, and then it becomes me ball, and that's not conducive to winning, and it's not conducive to building a culture. So I think that this team as a group, they do have a lot to answer for last year and what happened with Mike Brown. And to be honest, like the whole all-in mentality that Mike Brown had in year one, it's almost like he should have reassessed who was all in and who wasn't at day one this last year, and asked for guys to not be there anymore if they weren't all in, because that's where we got to a point where there were players that weren't all in, and that's why you see the team as a whole start to let go of the rope. And one of those players clearly became not all in, and that was De'Aaron Fox. And of course he gets traded, but he's not the only one that was on one side or another of this whole debacle. And a lot of those guys are still in the building, and they need to do what's best for the franchise and do what's best for their teammates, and not be so much concerned about themselves.
Is that a question do you think Scott Perry has asked? Or maybe Doug Christie, or maybe them together?
Oh, I missed that.
I said, is that a question that you think Scott Perry has asked, or maybe Scott Perry and Doug Christie have asked the guys that are here?
Yeah, it's going to be day one of training camp. It's going to be that day one, they'll have, so what they typically do is we'll have media day, and then a lot of times they'll have a dinner. Like they might have a dinner the night before media day, and it's in that meeting that you set the tone for what's going to happen here, and what's going to be the plan, and how you're going to manage your business this season. And what are the expectations? What is the structure that's going to be put in place? What are the rules that are going to be put in place? And how are you going to adhere to that? And so, yeah, I think, again, Doug will have his talk. Scott will have his talk. They'll both be on the same page with what the messaging is, because that's the way it works. And you're going to hopefully go in with a cohesive unit. But again, we say that on September 27th or whatever media day is, like a cohesive unit that day versus 2 weeks later or a month later or 5 months later. Like that changes throughout the year. And, these guys have to stay together and all be pulling in one direction, or this thing could go the wrong way, like very quickly.
Doug Christie and Scott Perry, those two are the leaders of this franchise right now, right? It's not a player that has as much pull as those two, correct? I'm asking that question now, even though it sounds like I'm stating it as a fact. But in your opinion, it's their team? They're the leaders, right?
As far as Doug and Scott?
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, yeah, they are two of the leaders, and it's sort of their world you're playing in. But the players always have their own leader, and the leaders of this team, I think pretty clearly, even though they're not like vocal, super rah-rah guys, Domas is one of the leaders of this team. DeMar DeRozan is one of the leaders of this team. Malik Monk is one of the leaders of this team. And then you got to figure out if there are any other voices that want to step up and be part of that. I think this is a good locker room. It's a good group of dudes. They care about each other. They're about the right things. But at the same time, staying together when, we talk about the first 19, 20 games of the season, when it could be rough. Like, just because the first 19, 20 games are rough doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to climb back into a season, get your own 8-2 win streak after that, or something where you can jump right back into the chase. But yeah, they're going to have to figure out like who's the loudest voice in that locker room, and is it the right voice, because some of those voices that you expect to be leaders in this whole, 82 game adventure, sometimes they're not. And sometimes you chose the wrong guys to be sort of your leaders. And so you're going to have to assess and see what it looks like going into camp. And maybe somebody else has stepped forward. We don't know. There might be somebody on that team that is just different, that we're not around, or we haven't been around throughout their career. Maybe it's a Dennis Schroeder. Maybe he walks in the door and has a swag and has a big voice and says, "Hey, look, I played for a bunch of different teams. I've seen everything you can possibly imagine. You guys should probably listen to me, because if you don't want to end up moving teams for the next 5 years, then this is a pathway forward." And so I think that there are options for different guys to step up. And you can always tell, like, again, who the team kind of believes are leaders by the way they structure the locker room. So I've told you guys this before, like the first locker when you walk in the door and the last locker are typically leaders. There's usually one or two right in the middle of the locker room as well. And then it kind of like, as you fan across the locker room, you know, you can have younger players, you can have guys that just aren't that type of guy, who aren't a vocal guy at all. And so it really does depend on, I think we'll learn a lot too about just how the team itself or the franchise itself views the guys in the locker room and sort of their leadership qualities.
I haven't been in the Kings locker room since pre-pandemic, but I remember.
I don't think you're allowed. We don't have that James Ham clearance,
have that
threat level midnight credential.
But I remember when I was doing some credential stuff before that, I think, to James's point, the first locker was Fox. I think the last locker was Shump. I think that's how
Shump was close to the end. To be honest with you, I think it went Shump and then Buddy Hield. I think Buddy Hield had the last locker on that far side. But again, like when we talk about leaders, a lot of times it is that personality, that big personality that, you know, people do gravitate towards, whether again is Shump or Buddy, but also, you know, like we've seen it like Malik. Malik is a guy who people gravitate towards. He's a guy that a lot of people in the locker room, you know, they like as a person, they want to hang out with. He's got an infectious personality. And so again, like there are all kinds of different types of leaders. It's not just, you know, the person who is the loudest or the most boisterous. And sometimes it's not the best player on your team either. You got to figure out sort of how it is that you're going to build your leadership council and kind of go from there.
I think there's a lot of guys though who can fit into that. Like I think Dennis was an interesting name to bring up because I do think Dennis Schroeder kind of fits into that category. But the one that we really talked about, or at least that I really, was DeMar. I think DeMar can be the guy who that first day when you're getting on the floor, he can be the one who pulls everybody together. He can be the one who says, "Hey, last year was last year. You know, let's get moving forward." Like, I think he can be the defining voice for this team, along with Doug and well, really Doug, but I can see him being the defining voice of this team.
Yeah, that's possible. I'd also, you know, not that he's on the team, but I'd add Westbrook if Westbrook is brought in by this team.
When Westbrook is brought, positive affirmations, James Ham.
James said,
yeah, that's what I'm doing.
positive for who? Right. Positive for D'Lo.
Yeah, I would just say, like, look, it's there are just voices that walk in the locker room and have like a specific type of cachet, and I think DeMar has that cachet. I think that, you know, again, but I will say this, like, we had Vince Carter in the locker room and Zach Randolph in that same locker room, and I believe, man, who is the other? They had George Hill. And on top of that, Trevor Ariza, is that who they signed that offseason? There was one more. And I would still say, like, some of the biggest voices in the locker room and the voice that, or the people that, the voice that people trusted and went to was still guys like Garrett Temple. So like there are ways, like there are all kinds of stature and stuff in the locker room and respect that you're going to show specific people. But there's also like that sometimes that doesn't matter, their status, their stature, and like you show respect to a guy like DeMar, but whether he decides to take on like a full-fledged leadership, you know, stand in front of the group and demand stuff on a daily basis type deal, that hasn't been DeMar throughout his career. And, you know, he is a quiet guy who he'll be the first one to tell you, like, I'm not a rah-rah guy at all. So sometimes it is that guy and sometimes it's not. And again, you don't really know until you put all these pieces together, because it's like a really complicated mixture of personalities. Like you could have one of the stronger leaders in the NBA walk into a new locker room, and if he doesn't fit in and he doesn't feel welcome and he isn't empowered by the other players to feel like he can be that leader, it doesn't matter how good of a leader he is, he's not going to find his voice in the same way if everybody's behind you. So again, I'm kind of intrigued about that dynamic specifically because, I've seen so many different versions of what a leader is in Sacramento and what a leader isn't in Sacramento. And I think that people just miss it. Like, De'Aaron Fox was a leader, and people like always say, oh, well, he's not the guy who's like running out in front of everybody, or he's not the one who's, calling the huddle or anything. No, but when he talks and he's on the court, everybody listens because he's their best player, or he was their best player. And so you do gravitate towards those guys, especially when they've got something to say. And, it's sort of the old quarterback thing, like quarterback is the one who runs the huddle. And that's in a lot of ways, even though De'Aaron Fox wasn't somebody that we all looked at and said, oh, he's just an incredible leader. He still led in his own way and still had a huge voice in that locker room.
James, do you follow Scott Perry's Monday Motivations?
I don't. I'm not a like daily affirmation or Monday affirmation type guy. I don't have calendars on my wall with cats that say "hang in there, little fella" or anything like that. That's not who I am as a person. And I don't, like if you're that type of person, that's fine. That reads that stuff, but it's just not me.
He had one this past Monday that we talked about a little earlier. And he's just that's just what he does. Like he's an affirmation guy. I don't believe in any way it's related to anything going on in his professional life or nothing like that. But he had this one that needs to be printed out and put in the locker room, in the practice facility, in the front offices, and maybe even at the Capitol, because this was one of the biggest problems that we've talked about a lot with the Sacramento Kings. It says when you blame others, you are affirming that you have no power and your existence is only a reaction to the power of others. When you stop blaming and become positively self-examining, you will begin to move forward. Blame keeps us stuck in the past. We cannot change the past. We can only learn from it. Empowerment is never about blame. It's about taking personal responsibility. And James, we've been doing this for 2-3 years. What is one of my frustrations with this entire franchise been? Everybody that comes through here looks for somebody else to blame instead of doing their job. And I think that is at the core of what is a problem in this franchise. And if you got a guy like Scott Perry who has a different mindset and maybe can get that mindset throughout the front office, throughout the locker room, I think Doug Christie feels the same exact way. That could be just what the doctor ordered with this franchise.
Yeah, I'm with you. But at the same time, it's one thing to say it. It's one thing to put a tweet out. It's a whole other thing to actually be able to accomplish what you're set out to do. And I think again, like the Monty West pairing, like they did really good things. We can bash on the outcome and where the Kings are at now and all that stuff all we want, but that doesn't change the fact that they delivered the first playoff series in 16 years and that they built a winner. They just weren't they weren't able to build a sustainable winner. And the fact that they weren't able to maintain the momentum and stuff, yeah, that was on them. I've been one of their harshest critics when it comes to like the post beam team one, right? But again, an off season where you brought in a first round pick and a second round pick, a late first round pick, an early second round pick, and then Dennis Schroeder, like that's not going to change a 40-win team. You're still a 40-win team. You might be a little bit better. You could also be a little bit worse. We don't know, but like the team that's on paper, and that's where it's like, hey, like I get that you can only blame who you can blame, but I also think that this franchise has been very good at shifting the blame and putting it on someone else all the time. And, so guys like Monty and Wes walk out the door and, it's like it's easy to harp on them and put so much blame on them. There have been people here that deserve that type of blame on the way out the door. But I also look at like the last couple of moves that were made here, and that most of those moves were made by people who did not feel like their standing was in the right place, and they were clinging to something that was really good 2 years earlier and had like started to dwindle, and they didn't know how to fix what was happening. And the answer was to not do what they had always done before, which was forge a path on a specific design and continue the build. It was to go in different directions, almost like without like really worrying about the ramifications of what they were doing. And again, I didn't understand. It's not just one move or two moves. There's a handful of moves here towards the end that these guys did that, again, it just weren't up to the standard that they had set for themselves in the past. And so I'm hoping that Scott Perry is able to take control of this situation and to build what he wants to build. But, I think it comes down to like one of the most interesting questions that we'll have. It's like, the Jerry Reynolds-ism is, if you have a 5-year plan in the NBA, you have no plan at all. Realistically, if you have a 2-year plan, if 2027 is your plan and that's 2 years from now, I hate to tell you, you don't have a plan at all, because by 2027, you might be able to clean the decks and get everybody off, all the big contracts gone. But have you built anything that's good? Like, just because you get, like, we can talk all we want about the flaws of Domantas Sabonis or DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine, but the fact is they're really talented players and they have value as talented players, whether it's value to the Kings or value out there with other teams. But I mean, if we're just talking about like purging the entire organization, well, what are you left with and how quickly can you build? And let's be honest, if you have 2 really bad seasons that lead to an even worse season where you're rebooting, like, how long do you get to make the decisions? And the answer is typically not very long. You don't get to, there isn't an unlimited amount of time that you get to go recreate something that you think is in your image. Either you get it done or you don't. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly Scott can do things. But also, is it just getting worse to get worse? So you're setting yourself up better for a couple of years from now when you might not be the one making those decisions a couple of years from now.
James, you said a lot there. I want to dive into all of it. So we'll spend some more time with our insider from the insiders. It's James Ham here with D'Lo and KC on Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320. Pipe down.
John Lynch on Jake Moody. Quote, I found it interesting after a hell of a game in Las Vegas. A lot of people still have questions. And when you have a season like last year, they'll remain. But we have a lot of belief in him, ... from what we see out there.
All right, you guys are cooked.
Yeah. Margin of error is just so slim.
All right. All right.
Hey, what's the big deal? He made it in the preseason game.
John Lynch said, quote, a while ago, Jennings asked to be traded, but, quote, we've moved on. He's been putting work on the side. Both can be true. He wants a new contract, and he has a hurt calf. Everyone assumes one or the other. Both can be true. End quote. I got to be honest, that was a hell of an answer by him. That was a good answer because it's not really answering anything. It's not even telling us something that we don't know. Like, yeah, his calf hurts. Yeah, he wants a new contract. The question is he willing to, when his contract, or excuse me, when his calf feels better, to not play because he wants a new contract? That's what everybody wants to know. They also said, we're not trading him. Said, we're not trading him.
It'd be a bad move if Jennings sat out into the season because of his contract.
I think so, too.
He's not at that status where it's like, oh, yeah, we did a deal after the season. No, I'd rather go play.
He can. And I think Juwan Jennings is a heck of a receiver. I love Third and Juwan, all that other stuff. He's a hell of a find. But he could mess around and find himself passed up. Like if the right signings happen, if the right people step up, if the right people come back from injury, suspension, you could come back and be a non-factor.
Yeah, I don't think he's been a non-factor though the last couple of years. He's been the third wide receiver, but like what he did last year, like I get what he's doing right now. Like if you have leverage, you got to take advantage of the position you're in, right?
I get it too, but if you play the wrong hand, they put George Kittle more into the passing game. DeMarcus Robinson comes back. Ricky Pearsall is able to stay healthy, and you find one other guy that ends up being solid. They might mess around and be like, "All right, we maintain without you. Like we're fine."
And I'll just I get that, but at the same time, Ricky Pearsall hasn't been able to stay on the field. So if Pearsall gets hurt, if Ayuk,
if any of these guys get hurt, like if George Kittle goes, like if somebody gets hurt, that's just the nature of the beast. But like he's opening up the door. Like say, for instance, I think Juwan Jennings is a better receiver. But say, for instance, they do bring back Kendrick Bourne, and Kendrick Bourne becomes that third down guy he was in 2019 or whatever. Now they might have replaced you.
Yeah. I get that. I just there comes a point where you look at the roster, you look at the injuries around you, and you know how much the team is and needs your services. I don't blame Juwan Jennings. You know, he's worth more than the $7.5 million he's being paid, and he's entering the final year of his contract. There should be a happy medium here, and I'm not saying give him Brandon Ayuk money because I'm not doing that, but I certainly would, talk about giving him $15 million a year over 3 years or something, and
Backhammer. It's football talk with KC and James Ham.
Well, your boy John Lynch was talking today.
So I missed that. John Lynch was as I was walking out, you were reading during the commercial break. John Lynch was talking about Jake Moody.
Yeah, so I'll work backwards because that tweet is right here in front of me. He spoke on Juwan Jennings.
Okay.
And he said, Cam Inman says, Lynch said, quote, a while ago, Jennings asked to be traded, but, quote, we've moved on. Quote, he's been putting in work on the side. Both can be true. He wants a new contract, and he has hurt his calf. Everyone assumes it's one or the other. Both can be true, end quote. He also said, we're not trading him. He's made that clear. So we're not trading him. So there's that. We can talk about that in a second, but he said this was the low light of the day when asked about Jake Moody. Quote, found it interesting after a hell of a game in Las Vegas. A lot of people still have questions. And when you have a season like last season, they'll remain. We have a lot of belief in him, ... from what we see out here, end quote.
Boy, them ... allowed. All right, man. All right.
I don't know what John is saying, bro. I don't see it. Are they watching a different practice? Are they watching a different preseason game?
Well, to be fair, you're not watching practice.
I'm watching the game.
Maybe he's 10-10 in practice.
He was like 21 or 22 before the first preseason game.
Also, who cares that he's making them in practice?
There ain't no crowd out there to distract him. Ain't no home crowd out there for him to feel pressure from.
Yeah, it's like, all right, let me go kick for a few minutes or whatever.
When them lights came on and they weren't even the brightest lights. He's kicking them all over the place.
He's the Quincy Doobie of kickers.
Oh, Quincy Doobie is not bothering anybody.
Shout out Rutgers. Shout out Rutgers. Just man in their own business. Shout out Rutgers. Jersey, stand up.
Great practice player. Great practice player.
Man, Kings have had a lot of those though, haven't they? Guys who just hoop in practice.
Yeah, they should. They're in the NBA. You're good at basketball. You should be able to do something. Then the lights turn on.
No.
We can't even find you.
Hammer, you think next offseason will be different? I'm speaking not necessarily broad like the NBA, but for the Sacramento Kings, with Zach LaVine entering what will be an expiring year for his contract. DeMar, assuming he's here, there's that, the kind of the non-guaranteed portion of his contract. Do you think next year, with this year kind of going by quietly, the acquisition of Dennis Schroeder, obviously a big deal, and, whatever remains the rest of the way, it's at this point, it's been pretty quiet. Mm-hmm. Given those, kind of parameters, do you think next offseason will be a little bit different?
No, I think next offseason, like, there will be fireworks. Like, I'm surprised there wasn't more fireworks this offseason. But look, if you intend on changing the course of this team and this franchise, like, you've got to be aggressive. And, you're going to have the decision to make on DeMar DeRozan's final year of his contract. You're going to have, whatever happens with Keon. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot that can happen between now and next offseason.
Oh, it's all good.
He's bored with the Kings doing nothing, and I can't blame him.
Air conditioner kicked on.
As a matter of fact, he's bored with this entire NBA offseason. It's the worst NBA offseason in history.
Damn, Shams.
Yeah.
Shams went all in, too. He's like, this is going to be crazy.
This is worse than his Big 3 tweet.
Shams like, this is going to be crazy. Yeah, you're right. It's crazy that it's trash. It's crazy that it's trash. Damn, Shams. That's my boy, too. I like Shams, but it's a hell for him. Yeah. This offseason was not a good look. Kings actually.
Or Shams just sitting around on dates with his phone in his hand, like, baby, I got to go. I think the Wi-Fi is broken. No one's texting
me. Kings actually did sign a free agent, though, in this dead offseason. Dennis Schroeder, who's playing really well in Euro. James, I said something the other day. I think he's a really good, a top flight international player. I think he's pretty good in the NBA too, but I wonder if any of it'll bleed over into his time here in Sacramento and being able to lead a team from the point guard position, which he hasn't really been able to do in his last couple of stops. Maybe he's got an understanding of how to do that after his time with the German national team.
Yeah, I mean, I think playing international ball for certain players is really good. I mean, you're always worried about the injury situation. We saw Luka early in the summer. Well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, like, take a bad step and everyone was freaking out. So there's always that worry. But, playing basketball during the off season is a good thing. You want your players going out and, going to Rico runs down at UCLA, doing whatever it is they can to stay on the court and just continue to build who they are as players. As far as again, with Schroeder, he is, over 30. You don't want to have tired legs coming into the season. I remember when the Kings signed Bogdan Bogdanovic, he'd already played something stupid, 78 games that year before his rookie season in Sacramento. And then it's like, hey, my body's not holding up. It's like, okay, no S, Sherlock. It's like, you played so many games, you're worn out. We get it. And then you have to sort of reboot and figure out who you're going to be. But for Schroeder, the leadership aspect might be the biggest thing. And it's not easy to lead when you bounce around, You can be a really good voice in the locker room, but at the same time, people look at you differently when you move around all the time than when you've been with one team forever or two teams forever. And, they sort of envision you as like a Chicago Bull or San Antonio Spur or a Toronto Raptor like it is with a guy like DeMar. It's not like, and that's in 16 years. The last two seasons, this is his sixth team, fifth team, sixth team, sixth team. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's tough because you're hoping that this is, as a player, you're hoping that you found a home, but you're also like, the players around you need to figure out who you are and why it is you change teams all the time, because that's not always a good thing. Being wanted is a good thing, but also like, it's not always a good thing when you switch teams all the time.
I'd also say it's not always a bad thing. Like
Yeah.
I understand the idea, like Schroeder, and we traced it back to that Lakers contract. Like, he has been on affordable contracts for the last 5 years. I think it was 4 or 5 years, and it's turning down that Lakers deal, never having big money attached to you, and wind up becoming an easily movable asset. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means, oh, we're doing a trade. We need some salary to throw in here. Our team's not going anywhere. Let's get Dennis in here. And like, I get it's still like, oh, he's not sticking with teams, but it doesn't mean he's a cancer. And I know that's not what you were saying. And it doesn't mean he's a bad basketball player. It just means he had a deal that they were willing to navigate around, or he had a deal they were willing to navigate around.
Well, and it doesn't mean that he'll be on this team, after the deadline. Like, it's just the reality of the situation. Depends on how things are going. It depends on who becomes available. Yeah. We talk about all the negative things that could happen here. There's also a possibility that, hey, like, bad things happen to a couple other teams, and their stance on some of their players might change by the time we get to the trade deadline. And then all of a sudden you do have, like, even going in right now into the season, a guy like Malik Monk on an $18 million contract, which would now be like 2.5 years. You've got Schroeder on a 2-year, 2+1. You've got, Levine on a 1.5 years left on his contract. You got an expiring contract in DeMar DeRozan with $10 million for next year. So, like, look, there's a possibility that you do get to reshape your roster at midway through this year with a big power move of your own, just because you do have, like, these movable pieces that we talk about. These are contracts that again, the Golden State Warriors don't want because they're long term right now, but they won't be long term in a couple of months. None of them are so bad that you're looking at them going, hey, how do I get out from underneath this thing? Even we talk about the Malik Monk, the final year at 20 million as a player option, 20.5 or whatever it is. It's still not a bad, horrible, like, I can't get out from underneath this type of contract deal. So I do think that the Kings have, like, the opportunity here, whether it's Schroeder, whether it's some of the other players, to go out there and try to get better whenever it happens. And sometimes it's just having the trade chips to go out and get better when somebody else is like, hey, it's time for me to bail on this situation or this player. And so we got to keep an open mind on all of these things.
Dame, we assumed a little bit earlier. We should give James the opportunity to actually answer the question that we were talking about on the handoff. And he might have answered it on the Insiders, but let's do it again if you did. The scenario that Kyle put out earlier with Zach LaVine's playing really well. You get offered first-round pick and a rotational player if you're the Sacramento Kings. We'll just ask you, are you making that deal?
I mean, it depends on what kind of contracts you have to take back. Like, I think that's the biggest part of it. I would consider it because, like, look, a lot of times when we have these discussions, people think that a lot of what I'm saying is, like, my own opinion. Sometimes it is my own opinion, and I make that very clear. But a lot of times too, it's based on what we know of the situation. Like, the Kings have said, no, we're not going to extend Zach LaVine this summer. We have no intentions of going into a contract negotiation, and we're just going to let this thing play out. Okay. So that means that you're not committing, just like, the Kings haven't committed to Keon Ellis. And at this point, they haven't committed to Keegan Murray. Like, there are a lot of things that they, like, either you're in or you're out. It's always like the question that the franchise asked, but at the same time, like we have to see if they're in or they're out on this group of players. And sometimes that takes time, but a $49 million balloon payment on Zach LaVine is due next year. I mean, that's a lot of money. And if you can break that up into 2 contracts that are either expiring or one's expiring and one's a really good deal or a really good player that you'd like to hold on to, okay, that's fine. You know, again, you can take a step back here and there talent-wise as long as you're making moves that make your roster make more sense. So again, if I see a deal where, you know, at the deadline, the Kings take back a $20+ million player on an expiring contract, but they also get a $20 to $25 million, like really, really quality player that you would like to have on your roster long-term, who might be under contract long-term, one expiring, one not. And then you walk into next season and you save $25 million or $24 million, something like that. Okay, I'm listening. So again, and that's because the Kings are telegraphing right now that Zach LaVine is part of their future for the next 2 years, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, who knows? And before that, if something else pops up, then sure, we'll listen. You know, so we're going to have to see how they approach this entire season. But I definitely could see a way in which they try to rebalance their roster, whether it's short term or long term, with a player that just fits what they're trying to do better. And that's with me knowing full well that, you know, Zach LaVine, if he's healthy and he's playing like he did last year, is going to be really, really good next to Domantas Sabonis and should, you know, have a very good season. But having a good season and having a winning season, like that's what matters. Having a winning season, to get back to your point that you like to make, Kenny, it should be about making the team better long term and trying to win long term. And, you know, if a team isn't committing to a player other than the 2 years that they have them under contract, then I don't know how much they're committing, especially when they have an opportunity to extend.
It seems like Hammer. Sorry, go
real
ahead,
quick. Do they have an opportunity to extend? Like
right now?
Do you think Zach LaVine would want to do that right now? Because if I was Zach, I'm gonna take my $50 million next year, and maybe we could talk next summer. But this year, I got $100 million coming. Like, I don't need to. I don't even know if I like Sacramento. I don't need to. We don't need to negotiate right now.
No, you might be right. He might say no way. But again, if the Kings came to him and said, "Hey, we'll give you a 2-year extension on top of the $49 million," where it's like 56 and 63, Zach LaVine's taking that money. He's taking that money. He's just like going to go buy himself a jet so he can get to his house way faster in Newport Beach.
Well, it was Kenny's first purchase when he got his contract was the jet to get to Lakers.
To get to Roseville faster.
It wasn't. It definitely wasn't the real one.
Kenny helicopter Caraway.
Me and Vivek taking the jet to the Kings games.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Oh, hey, everybody, here comes Kenny. It's landing his plane on top of the Golden One Center.
You can avoid that traffic like Vivek does, and why not, man? I don't want to. I drove that. I went down there to his house one time, and it was the longest. Like, I mean, I got stuck in traffic. It took me 6 hours to get there. It was not fun.
Doesn't he live in Atherton or Menlo?
It's Atherton. Atherton. Yeah.
What was Vivek's house like? Is that where he posts all the pictures from? Is that Vivek's house? James Big. I asked that James Big Instagram guy.
Yeah. See, maybe
James liked a reel we posted once. I was like, James saw this? Of course he was in it. I was like, how did he see this?
Oh, because Leezy sent it to me.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I posted this. It's doing really well. Sweet. Okay. Like,
I was like, man, James liked this. He actually saw it. Great.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
My bad. I interrupted your thought too.
It's fine. I thought we were going to solve all of the problems today, and we didn't.
We came close.
Did we?
What did we solve? Keegan can be on a championship team, the fourth option.
I think I agree with that. Like James made a good point. I think running through the teams, like okay.
Yeah.
That kind of sold me when you're like, he could be on the Pacers, he could be on this team, he could be on that team. And it's like, all right, well, who's here in Sacramento where that works? So Keegan's a championship ball player.
Yeah.
I'd also say like the Kuminga discussion, like could Kuminga be that same exact thing? And the answer is no, because he hasn't been willing to accept a role yet. There could come a point in his career where, again, talent-wise, he's incredible, but there could come a point where he's willing to accept roles and could fit on any team. And I think that's one of the good things about Keegan. He can fit on anything, on any team. I'd also look at the team that he played with last year, and we talk about, well, he had to play with Steph and he had to play with Jimmy Butler. He also got to play with Steph and he got to play with Jimmy Butler, which opens a whole lot of things up for you to go do things, to go score, and to have like not a lot of focus on you. Where I don't think the Kings have a bunch of guys who shoot a bunch of shots and are scorers, but they don't have like the ultimate like guys that the entire defense gravitates towards. Even De'Aaron Fox was more of that than the guys that they have now, where the whole entire court leans one way when De'Aaron Fox is on it. And that's just not, that's what happens with Steph. Jimmy Butler maybe to a lesser degree, but like it does help a guy like Kuminga getting to play with guys like that, especially when he was allowed to be kind of their third scorer for a lot of the season.
Technically, you can win a championship with Kuminga. They did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did it. World's best cup of coffee. We did it.
It's the craziest championship ever.
That was wild. I hate that it happened. I really do.
We all hate that it happened. Well, Drew Down doesn't. Uncle Loon doesn't, but I think the rest of us do. All right. Well, we tried. I guess we'll try again tomorrow.
We got this. We got
at some point.
Figure it out.
At some point, we're gonna. The good news is for Kings fans, this year you're probably going to be happy. Either the Kings are going to win games and they're going to make the playoffs, or they're going to lose games, miss the playoffs, get a lottery pick, and you're going to be happy either way.
It's a win-win. Think about
like
it.
I mean, and I don't mean everybody's going to be happy. I mean the two very distinctively different groups that exist are going to be happy. Now the tough part would be is if they finish 12th and got the 12th pick. 12th was right, got the 12th pick. It'd be like, see, we had just lost more games. That's the only thing that'll upset the apple cart a little bit.
Can't make everybody happy.
If things go that way, things went really bad this year.
Yeah.
Really bad. And I'm not here for that.
I'm not interested in that either. I want to see some good basketball. I want to see some wins.
I think we see good. Yeah.
Life's too short.
Me too. And I'm anxious for this Jonathan Kuminga thing to be over with forever, which it won't be. It'll be over with for a year. And then they'll just have to go through. I guess, I mean, they'll go through some form of something next year, as James has talked about, the salary cap, signing trades, cap money, all of those different things. So, sorry, we'll try again tomorrow. I don't know what to tell you, but we appreciate you so much for being with us. We're going to head over to 102.5, do our business there. Casey's going to be at 32 Brew Street tonight for Coach's Corner. Coach Brendan Merriam's going to be with us here on this show tomorrow at 1:15-ish. So make your plans to be with us around there. And, of course, tap in tomorrow morning. James, Kyle, the Insiders, 10 a.m. here on Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320.
Vamos Smashburger.